Piper Alden hadn't expected her job interview to end with her running through Manhattan in a thunderstorm, heels in hand, soaked to the bone, mascara streaking down her cheeks like war paint. She darted across the street, lightning cracking above her, and yanked open the heavy glass door of the nearest building. The security guard behind the desk blinked at her as water puddled around her feet. "Sorry," she panted, hugging her handbag to her chest. "I just need to wait out the rain." "I am not trying to break in or anything." The man hesitated, then nodded toward a hallway. "There's a private lounge just past the elevators. No one's using it." "Thank you," she said, already jogging toward it. She pushed open the double glass doors at the end of the corridor and stepped into a world that didn't fit her day. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, velvet armchairs circled a marble fireplace, and soft jazz played from hidden speakers. It was the kind of place Piper had only seen in movies: quiet, rich, untouchable. She stood awkwardly near the entrance, dripping, until a deep voice behind her said, "You look like you fought the storm and lost." Piper turned, startled, as a tall man in a crisp navy suit stepped away from the bar, holding a towel in one hand and a glass of something amber in the other. He was unfairly good-looking, dark hair tousled like he'd just run a hand through it, sharp jaw, and eyes the color of bitter espresso. But it wasn't just his looks, it was how he carried himself. Like the room bowed to him without him asking for it. She blinked. "I wasn't planning on being a drowned rat today, but, well, the universe," he smiled, holding out the towel. "Here, not exactly hotel luxury, but it's clean." She took it, their fingers brushing briefly. "Thanks, I didn't mean to crash some exclusive lounge. I just needed somewhere dry." "You didn't crash anything," he set his drink down. "This building is mine." Piper froze. "Wait, yours?" He nodded like it was no big deal. "Asher Knox, I own Knox Industries. This is our corporate tower." She nearly dropped the towel. "Asher Knox, the Asher Knox. Billionaire CEO, tech mogul, one of Forbes' youngest power players. She'd read about him last week while eating instant noodles. I'm sorry. I didn't realize." "It's fine," he said, clearly amused by her panic. "You're probably the most interesting thing that's happened in this lounge all week." She laughed, surprised. "That's a low bar." "Maybe." He looked at her, really looked. "What's your name?" Piper Alden." "Nice to meet you, Piper." His gaze flicked to her bare feet. "You're going to catch a cold." "I've already accepted my fate." He chuckled and motioned to the couch. "Sit, I'll get you something warm." "I'm not." "Sit," he said again, gentler this time. "You look like you've had a day." She hesitated, then dropped into the velvet couch. Everything about it screamed expensive. She probably wasn't supposed to be sitting on it in wet clothes. When he returned, he handed her a steaming mug. "Chamomile," he said. "Didn't peg you as a whiskey in the afternoon type." "I probably wouldn't taste it anyway. I'm still recovering from inhaling half the city's rainwater." Piper took a sip. Warmth bloomed in her chest. "Thank you, really, I didn't expect any kindness today." "Bad day?" She hesitated. "Job interview, publishing assistant. The woman interviewing me asked if I'd be okay working unpaid for the first 6 months. Then she said my resume was unfocused. I left before I cried." Asher's brow furrowed. "That's illegal." "Well, apparently not if they call it a trial mentorship." He leaned against the edge of the fireplace. "What do you want to do, ideally?" "Write," she said, then regretted it. "I mean, I know everyone wants to write, but yeah. I'm working 3 jobs just to stay in the city and chase something that probably won't happen." "You don't strike me as the kind of person who gives up easily." She blinked. "You just met me. I'm a good judge of character." They looked at each other for a beat too long. Piper's heart kicked up, confused and flustered. She stood abruptly. "I should go. I've already overstayed." "You haven't," he said, stepping closer. "But if you want, I'll have my driver take you home. I can take the subway. I'd feel better if you didn't have to stand in wet shoes under flickering lights next to someone talking to pigeons." She bit her bottom lip. "You do know you're a stranger offering me a ride in a thunderstorm, right? I just gave you my name, my company, and a towel. I think I'm past stranger by now." She laughed, unable to stop the smile that tugged at her lips. Fine, but only if there's no creepy small talk. His grin widened. I'll try to behave. Asher walked her to the private elevator, and as they stepped in, the doors closed with a soft chime. Piper exhaled, glancing at him. You really own all of this, he nodded. Started small, grew fast. Now I mostly put out fires and avoid boardrooms when I can. Sounds thrilling. I'd trade it for real conversation and someone who doesn't want something from me. Is that what this is? She asked, arching a brow. A search for real conversation, maybe, he said, voice low. Or maybe I just really wanted to offer you that towel. The elevator opened directly to the underground garage where a sleek black car waited. The driver stepped out, nodding to Asher. Tell him your address, Asher said. He'll take you wherever you need. What about you? I've got meetings upstairs, but I'll see you again, Piper. How do you know that? He looked at her like it was already decided. Because I'm going to make sure it happens. And then he stepped back, letting the elevator doors close between them. Piper sat in the backseat of a billionaire's car, holding a towel, smelling like chamomile tea, and wondering how the hell stepping out of the rain had just changed her whole life. 3 days later, Piper was balancing a tray of oat milk cappuccinos on one arm and trying not to bump into anyone on the crowded sidewalk outside a boutique PR firm in Soho. A woman in oversized sunglasses blew past her, knocking the tray slightly, and Piper nearly lost a drink to the pavement. Careful, she hissed under her breath, steadying the cups as she reached the front desk. Delivery for Mercer and Hunt. The receptionist barely glanced up. Leave it there. Piper set the tray down, forced a polite nod, and turned to go, her sneakers already soaked from the lingering puddles. The job at the cafe barely covered her half of the rent, but it kept her afloat while she submitted short stories to literary journals that never responded. She hadn't thought about Asher Knox since the stormy afternoon in his building, except at night, when she stared at the ceiling and replayed the way he'd said her name like it already belonged to him. She didn't expect to see him again. People like him didn't chase people like her, not in real life. But that night, when she came home and found the envelope taped to her apartment door, her heart stopped. Inside was a crisp sheet of heavy cardstock embossed with gold lettering. An invitation. No note, no explanation, just her name and an address on the Upper East Side. She didn't own anything that would pass for cocktail attire. The closest thing she had was a black wrap dress she'd worn once to a wedding and heels buried in the back of her closet that pinched her toes. But something in her said go, even if it was a mistake, even if he never showed. The building was a limestone behemoth, with polished brass fixtures and a doorman who looked like he'd been carved from granite. She gave her name, and he nodded once, directing her to the elevator without asking for ID. When the doors opened on the penthouse floor, the space beyond looked less like a residence and more like a European art museum. Chandeliers glowed overhead. Sculptures lined the hallway. Music floated from down the corridor, something string heavy and elegant. Asher was waiting at the end of the foyer, dressed in a black-on-black suit that made him look like he belonged on the cover of a glossy magazine. His expression shifted subtly when he saw her, not surprise, not relief exactly, but something warmer, calmer. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I wasn't sure I should, he stepped forward. I wanted to show you something. A woman passed them with a tray of champagne flutes, and Piper took one, if only to have something to hold. What is this? A fundraiser, he said, motioning for her to follow. Technically, for a children's tech initiative. But mostly an excuse for people to dress up and pretend they care about something other than their stock portfolios. And you invited me. I figured you'd be the only person in the room not trying to pitch me an app or ask for seed funding. She glanced around. The room was full of sleek dresses, polished shoes, and conversations that sounded like code words for investments. I definitely don't belong here. You belong wherever you decide to be. She didn't know how to respond to that, so she took a sip of champagne and let him lead her down a short hallway into a quieter space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a soft view of the city lights. "I read your story," he said. "What?" He turned to her. "The one you submitted to Greyline Review. I know one of the editors. He sent it over last night." She stared at him. "That's not even published. It's not even accepted. It should be. You're not a literary critic." "No," he said, "but I know what moves people. Your writing did," she faltered. "You pulled strings to get someone to read it." "I nudged a door open. You walked through it." "I didn't ask you to do that. I know. But I'm not sorry." She took a step back, unsure if she should feel flattered or furious. "You can't just buy access to someone's life." "I didn't buy anything. I was curious. I wanted to know more." She crossed her arms. "Why?" "Because you didn't look at me like everyone else does," he said simply. "You didn't want anything. You weren't impressed. You told me about your worst day like I was just some guy with a towel." "You were," she said, softer than she meant to. He stepped closer. "I still am." They stood in silence as the city stretched beyond the glass behind him, glowing like it was holding its breath. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked finally. "Inviting me here, reading my work. What's the end game?" "There isn't one," he said. "I just wanted to see you again. And I didn't want it to be in a coffee shop while you're running orders." She looked down, unsure of what to say. "I don't expect anything," he added. "But if you're willing to let me be part of your story, even just a chapter, I'd like that." Her fingers tightened around the stem of the glass. "I don't do fairy tales." "I'm not offering one," he said. "Just a night, a conversation, no expectations." She glanced toward the party, then back at him. "Then talk to me, really talk." He smiled, not charming, not practiced. "Real?" "Okay," he said, stepping aside to let her pass first. "But I should warn you, I have terrible opinions about poetry." She laughed, the first true laugh in days, and walked into the light. Behind them, the party carried on, oblivious. But for Piper, something had shifted. Not in the way her heart thudded when he looked at her, or how his voice seemed to settle somewhere beneath her skin, but in the way the air felt different now. Like maybe, just maybe, the world had cracked open a little. The following week arrived with a knock at Piper's door, not a storm. She hadn't given Asher her address, but when she opened it and saw a woman holding a garment bag with a discreet gold-foiled envelope clipped to the top, she didn't need to ask how he'd found her. "I was instructed to deliver this to Miss Alden," the woman said with the kind of practiced elegance that made it clear she was used to dealing with clients who had private elevators. Piper accepted the bag and envelope. The woman offered a polite nod and disappeared down the hall without waiting for a signature. Inside the envelope was a single card. "I'd like to borrow your evening." No elaborate explanation, no pressure. Just an invitation, implied and open-ended. The garment bag unzipped to reveal a midnight blue slip dress, delicate and fluid, like it had been made from melted stars. Beneath it, a pair of silver heels gleamed. She didn't know how he'd guessed her size, but somehow it was perfect. Piper stared at the dress for a long time. It wasn't hers, not just in ownership, but in identity. It belonged to someone who moved through penthouses without flinching, who knew how to hold a flute of champagne like it was second nature. But she put it on anyway. The car that arrived just before sunset didn't honk. It waited silently, sleek and black, until she stepped inside. When the door opened at the top of a brownstone in the West Village, Asher was already waiting. No staff, no crowd. Just him, standing in a room lit with floor lanterns and the warm glow of an open kitchen. He wasn't in a suit tonight. He wore a dark sweater, sleeves pushed to his elbows and soft charcoal slacks that made him look less like a headline and more like a man. "You found it," he said, eyes flicking down to her dress, lingering for a moment before lifting back to her face. "It looks better than I imagined. I still feel like I borrowed someone else's life. Maybe you just haven't met this version of you yet." She stepped inside, glancing around. "Where are we?" "My place," he said. "The one I come to when I don't feel like being watched." "You have more than one." "I have 5, he said, pouring a glass of wine and handing it to her. "But only this one feels like mine." The space wasn't what she expected, exposed brick walls. Art that looked like it had been collected slowly, not bought in bulk. A record player in the corner, the scent of garlic and rosemary filled the air. "You cook?" she asked, surprised. "Only when I want the evening to go well." She laughed before she could stop herself. He guided her to the kitchen island, where 2 plates sat waiting seared scallops, roasted vegetables, and something green and complicated looking. "I didn't peg you for a scallop guy. I contain multitudes." They ate at the island, not a dining table, and she appreciated that. It felt intimate but not theatrical. Between bites, he asked, "Have you always written?" "Since I could hold a pen," she said, sipping her wine. "But I didn't really believe I could do it for real until college. Even then, it felt like something other people got to live out." "Not me." "What changed? My father got sick," she said, surprising herself by saying it aloud. "I dropped out senior year to take care of him. He used to tell me stories when he couldn't sleep. Wild, epic ones. I wrote them all down. He passed," she nodded. 3 years ago, I'm sorry." "I'm not," she said, then paused. "I mean, I miss him every day, but he gave me something before he left, a reason." Asher didn't try to fill the silence or offer a neatly packaged condolence. He just listened. She set her fork down. "What about you?" "Did you always want to run an empire?" "I wanted to build something that couldn't be taken away," he said. "My father was bankrupt by 40. My mother tried to shield us from it, but you don't forget the sound of collectors pounding on the door. So you made sure no one could ever knock again." "Exactly. That's a heavy way to grow up." He poured more wine for both of them. "It teaches you to read people fast. To know who's real and who's playing a part." "And what did you decide about me?" "I haven't decided yet," he said, voice low, "but I'm interested in the answer." They moved to the couch after dinner, no music, no distractions. Just the sound of the city outside and the occasional clink of ice in their glasses. "Have you ever been in love?" she asked before she could second-guess it. He looked at her for a long moment. "Once, when I was 20. She left when I started working 80-hour weeks. Do you regret it?" "I regret thinking love would wait for me to finish building something first." Piper leaned back, tracing the rim of her glass. "I've never had anyone choose me over ambition. Maybe they didn't deserve to. And maybe ambition always wins." "Not always," he said. Then, after a beat, "I didn't invite you here to dazzle you." "I'm not dazzled." "Good," he said, "because I don't want to impress you. I want to know you." "Why?" "Because when you walked into that lounge, it felt like the world shifted half an inch." She swallowed hard, unsure how to answer that. No one had ever said something like that to her, not without an agenda, not without strings. He reached out, brushing her wrist lightly. "I know this is fast. I know it's not normal. Normal is overrated." He smiled at that, then leaned closer, voice softer. "Can I kiss you?" She didn't answer with words. She closed the space between them and let her lips give the answer. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't hungry or desperate. It was deliberate, like both of them were learning something new with every second. When he pulled back, their foreheads touched, breaths tangled. "I wasn't expecting this," she whispered. "Neither was I," he said. "But I stopped waiting for the right moment. This feels like one." She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the mogul or the mystery, but the man who had handed her a towel in the middle of a storm and asked for nothing in return. "I don't want to be a chapter," she said. "I want to be the story." He brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Then let's write it." 2 weeks later, Piper stood at the edge of the rooftop garden Asher had invited her to see, though garden felt like too small a word for what surrounded her. Manicured hedges, flowering trellises, and soft lanterns strung overhead turned the skyline into a glowing backdrop. The air was thick with honeysuckle and something sweet she couldn't name. Somewhere below them, the city pulsed and roared, but up here, it was quiet. She turned as Asher stepped out from the glass doors behind her, sleeves rolled, no jacket, fingers brushing his watch out of habit. He looked at ease in a way she hadn't seen before, less like the man who owned half the skyline, more like someone who had finally stopped running long enough to breathe. "You've been quiet," he said, handing her a flute of something pale and sparkling. "I've been thinking," she replied, taking it. "About what happens next." He didn't ask what she meant, he just waited. "I got an offer," she said. "A residency in Vermont. A small press wanted to publish one of my short stories and invited me to spend a few weeks with their writers' cohort." "It's nothing fancy, but it's real." Asher's eyes didn't waver. "That's incredible." "I haven't said yes." "Why not?" "Because I don't know if I'm walking away from something I just started, or if I'm choosing myself for the first time." He set his glass down. "You don't have to choose one or the other. I want you to go if it's what you want. I'll be here when you get back." She studied him, searching for anything forced. There wasn't, only sincerity. "You're not afraid I'll change?" "I hope you do," he said. "Growth isn't something I want to protect you from. It's something I want to witness." She didn't say anything at first, then she stepped closer. "I've never had someone say that to me. You've never had someone keep showing up either," he said. "But I will." The sun dipped lower, turning the clouds burnished gold. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a slim leather-bound notebook. He held it out. "What's this?" "Your father's stories," he said. "I tracked down some of the things you mentioned. I thought maybe if you ever wanted to finish them, you'd have a place to start." Her fingers curled around it as her throat tightened. "How did you even?" "I remembered more than you thought I did." She opened it slowly. Inside, the first few pages were typed phrases and fragments she hadn't seen in years. Her handwriting filled the margins, not hers now, but the version of her that had scribbled beside hospital beds in the quiet hours of the night. She closed the notebook and looked up. "You found part of me I forgot existed." "I didn't find her," he said. "You brought her back." She leaned in and kissed him, not rushed, not uncertain. It was the kind of kiss that made the air still, that said everything words couldn't. When she pulled away, her voice was steady. "I want the residency," she said, "but I want to come back to this." He nodded. "Then I'll make sure this is still here when you do, whatever you need it to be." She left 2 days later, and he didn't ask for daily updates or phone calls at midnight. He sent her a single first-edition copy of the book she'd once told him changed her life, with a line underlined in ink. "What we find in a moment can last a lifetime," she wrote, uninterrupted. She walked trails lined with birch trees and read her stories aloud in rooms filled with strangers who listened like her words mattered. And when she finally returned to the city, the car waiting for her wasn't a town car or a chauffeur-driven black vehicle. It was Asher, behind the wheel, parked at the curb, one hand on the steering wheel, the other holding a bouquet of sunflowers she hadn't known she'd mentioned liking. He stepped out and opened the door for her. "Welcome home." She glanced at the flowers, then at him. "You remembered." "I remember everything." A month later, Piper stood in front of a small gallery wall inside an independent bookstore in Tribeca. There, framed behind glass, was the first page of her published story. The event wasn't about her just a reading night. But Asher had arranged for her work to be displayed anyway. After the reading, he took her hand and led her upstairs to the rooftop above the bookstore, smaller than his own rooftop garden, but lit with candles and fairy lights, a table set for two. The scent of roasted lemon and herbs drifted from the open kitchen door. Piper turned slowly. "This is where we had our first real conversation." "I know." She looked at the table, the sky, the city. "You don't have to keep creating magic for me." "I'm not," he said. "I'm just giving you the space to shine." She stepped closer and touched the edge of his collar. "And what do you get in return?" He met her gaze, serious now. She paused. "That's it. That's everything." She looked around once more and then back at him. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more certain." He reached into his jacket. "Not a ring box, just a single silver key." "I don't want to ask you to move in because it's convenient," he said. "I'm asking because I want you to write where you feel safe, to sleep beside someone who believes in you, to wake up to a life that doesn't ask you to shrink." Piper took the key. "I'm not ready for forever," she whispered. "I'm not asking for forever today," he said. "Just tomorrow." She smiled then, wide and real, and wrapped her arms around him. "I can promise you tomorrow," and she did. Not with words, but with the way she stayed. The wind tugged at Piper's coat as she stepped out of the brownstone, a stack of printed manuscripts clutched to her chest. The early spring air was cool but not biting, and the city hummed with the soft promise of change. She had just left a meeting with a boutique publisher who wanted to option her short story for a limited illustrated run, a small project, but one that gave her full creative control. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers, and the only person she wanted to tell was already waiting. Asher stood beside a black vintage convertible parked along the curb, one hand resting on the door, the other holding a folded paper bag. He didn't call out, he just waited, watching her with eyes that held no impatience, only calm expectation. "What's in the bag?" she asked as she reached him, tucking a loose curl behind her ear. "Victory pastries," he said. "Because I had a feeling you'd walk out smiling." She blinked. "You knew?" "No, but I hoped." He opened the passenger door for her. "And I didn't want to risk celebrating empty-handed." She slid in, setting the manuscripts on her lap as the scent of warm almond and apricot drifted from the paper bag. "You're not wrong," she said. "They want to publish it." He rounded the car, slid into the driver's seat, and glanced over. "Then I think we have a reason to escape the city for a night." "Where are we going?" He handed her a folded slip of paper. "Rate it." She opened it to find an address and a hand-drawn sketch of a small cabin beside a lake. "You drew this." "I did," he said, starting the engine. "Bought the place last year. Thought it might be useful for disappearing when everything gets too loud. I've never taken anyone there." She looked at him, slow realization dawning. "You want to take me to your quiet place. I want to show you the version of me that doesn't wear suits or answer to anyone." The drive took them out of the city, past the blur of suburbs and into the hush of pine forests and winding roads. They talked the entire way about books neither of them had finished, about the worst meals they'd ever cooked, about mistakes they wouldn't undo even if they could. By the time they pulled into a gravel driveway surrounded by tall trees and the glint of water just beyond, the sun was dipping low, brushing everything in coral and gold. The cabin was modest weathered wood siding, a porch with 2 cedar rocking chairs and windows that caught the last light like secret smiles. Inside, it smelled of cedar and something faintly herbal, like old books and time well spent. There were no grand gestures. No catered meals or designer furniture. Just a wood-burning stove, shelves full of dog-eared novels, and a bed piled high with mismatched quilts. Piper stood in the doorway, taking it all in. "This is the first place I've seen that actually looks like you." Asher dropped their bags near the wall. "That's the idea." They spent the evening wrapped in blankets on the porch, eating pastries and watching the stars bleed across the sky. There was no need to fill the silence. It wasn't empty. It was full of shared understanding, of things already said and things understood without needing words. After a long stretch of quiet, she said, "You know I don't need all of it, the penthouses, the events, the perfect clothes. I'd rather have burnt toast at a kitchen island if it means I get the real version of you." He turned to face her, expression unreadable. "I used to think I had to earn love by building something enormous, but you made me realize it's not about what I build, it's who I build it with." She shifted closer, resting her head against his shoulder. "So what do we build next?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a narrow box, velvet wrapped and understated. "I didn't bring this because I thought tonight needed a moment. I brought it because I couldn't imagine waiting anymore." Piper sat up slowly, heart thudding. He opened the box to reveal a ring not flashy, not oversized. A single emerald-cut diamond set in gold, flanked by 2 delicate sapphires. He didn't kneel. He didn't need to. "I want a life with you that isn't about escaping or achieving. I want the quiet mornings and the loud fights and the bad coffee and the 1,000 versions of ordinary that somehow feel like magic with you. Will you marry me, Piper?" She looked at the ring, then at him. "Only if we write our vows together." His grin was slow and certain. "Deal?" She slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. They stayed at the cabin that night, curled together beneath worn quilts, the fire crackling low as rain began to patter gently against the windows. And when she woke to the scent of cinnamon and the sound of Asher humming quietly while making breakfast, she knew this wasn't a chapter anymore. This was the beginning of the whole story. 3 months later, they married beneath an arched canopy of wildflowers in the same forest clearing behind the cabin. No press, no spectacle, just a small circle of friends, the scent of pine, and a sky so blue it felt like someone had painted it just for them. Asher wore no tie. Piper wore a gown the color of moonlight and bare feet. They read vows they had written by hand, words so personal and imperfect that everyone cried, including the officiant. When the ceremony ended, Asher kissed her with both hands cupped around her face, and the world blurred into nothing but that moment. Later, as dusk fell and music drifted from the porch, Piper sat curled on Asher's lap, surrounded by lantern light and laughter. She turned to him, her thumb brushing the corner of his mouth. "You still afraid someone might take it all away?" He shook his head. "No, because I finally understand something." "What's that, all this?" he said, gesturing gently to the cabin, the guests, the stars. "Isn't the legacy?" "You are," she leaned in, lips brushing his. "And you're mine." They kissed beneath the glow of 100 tiny lights, the scent of lavender and smoke curling in the air, and the knowledge between them that nothing about this was borrowed or fleeting. It was permanent, it was home.